Welcome into It's Just Wrestling, your favorite or 10th favorite pro wrestling podcast. I'm Russ Joy. It is a Sunday. It is a beautiful day for a little bit of pro wrestling action. And it is a day full of, let's call it an overloaded card. Shall we? Let's shall. Look, I like getting my money's worth on a pay-per-view. I do. And I actually do pay for the shows instead of going the way that many people do or that some may do for UFC shows. But, while WWE has kind of gone and made things a little bit easier, a little bit simpler to digest with like a 6-match card, AEW has always gone the other way. There are, I believe, 12 matches, and I'm actually going to pull them up here because of how absurd. It's in one way, you say like it's an embarrassment of riches, and in another way, you say this is absolute absurdity, and I don't know why they do this. And the other thing too, as we get prepared to get into it here, is that you do run the risk of having a crowd burn out. You know, like part of the problem that AEW tends to have is that they run an ROH show or they run Rampage after Dynamite, and you potentially burn a crowd out. There's only so much emotion you can get out of a live crowd. And for whatever reason, AEW consistently decides this is what we want to do. We want to go out of our way to load up a card. And again, getting your money's worth is massive. And so as a fan, I'll sit back and I'll never complain about the fact that I'm being given so much wrestling to consume. But I want everybody to look at this card because it's absolutely absurd in pretty much every way. This is your card for tonight. And I'm going to let's get rid of this guy. There we go. Absolutely insane. Let's go top to bottom. And the whole point of this show, obviously, is to hit you with some predictions for tonight. What could happen, what might happen, maybe even some would say what will happen. Now, I'm not going to act like I know how all of this is going to go, but I think that we can probably make some pretty safe assumptions about the way that at least a few of these matches will go. But I guess that remains to be seen. All right, let's dive into it. So there's one match on here that is absolutely absurd, does not belong. And what you don't see here are all the pre-match matches, all of the 0-hour matches, which, look, if we're being honest, I could make the case that at least one of the 0-hour matches should probably be on the main card. Like I said, I think it's 12 matches in total. The 0-hour, though, has a trios match that is going to... I guess they're saying is going to effectively unify the trios titles and the ROH 6-man belts. So that, of course, is going to be the Acclaimed and Daddy Ass versus the Guns and Jay White, the Bang Bang Gang. And I would rather see that match on the main card than one of the ones that we'll get to in a second. But they're going to start hot. This whole thing, what has happened between the Acclaimed and the Bang Bang Scissor Gang is like the most overbooked mess it has. I mean, look, it's almost inconceivable to think back to how hot the Acclaimed were at one point in this company and to think about how hot the act was with Daddy Ass and where it's kind of devolved to now, where you look at two sets of trios and you're like, I just want this to go away. The sooner the better. I like the Acclaimed a lot. I think that Anthony Bowens probably has a singles run in him. I think that Daddy Ass has done a very good job. Kind of sick calling him Daddy Ass. I just want to call him Billy Gunn. But like there's a part of me that sits back and says, you know what? Like there is a lot to be excited about here. But I want this match to be done. I want the feud to be done. I want the belts unified. And I ultimately would love to unify a lot of the titles that are currently on AEW programming because it is overkill to the nth degree. And you'll see it here as we go through it, but like it's just championship after championship after championship. And like when the entire card is virtually a championship match, it should be indicative of the fact that there are far too many titles in this company. Far, far, far too many. Some people like that. A lot of people don't. I hope we're going to cross our fingers here at some point. Maybe there are going to be some other unifications down the road, but as of right now, it's not the point. I would like to see the Bang Bang Gang get the win, unify the belts. They can go back and forth between Dynamite and ROH and Collision Ultimately, though, I do want to see Jay White on his own. I would like to see Jay White in a singles run. He was billed as being, let's not forget, he was an IWGP champion. Like, I would like to see Jay White get that run in AEW. He hasn't really. He had that feud with MJF. I feel like there's a singles run in there. I like the Guns a lot. I like the Guns better as a tag team. If I had my druthers, I never would have created the trios titles in the first place. I think that it just watered down and diluted the entire tag team division, which for AEW for the longest time was a massive, legitimate strength for the company. But I digress. Like, whatever, if you're going to have them, then you at least keep them on, you unify them, put them on the Bang Bang Gang, let another trio step up. I love House of Black. I think House of Black did a great job with the trios titles. Where do you pivot to after this match? Does it become the Elite? Do we see the Young Bucks? If they win the tag titles, we'll get to that in a little bit. Do they team up with like a Jack Perry who maybe returns? Could they run it with Okada and just have double belts for everybody? Entirely possible. Again, we'll get there in a little bit. But like, what other trio stands out? Shane Taylor Productions, like I'm guessing they'll be somewhere involved. It's always been weird to me that the BCC hasn't been involved, considering Wheeler Yuta is MIA. You have Claudio, you have Bryan Danielson, you have Jon Moxley. They're nowhere to be found in the trios division, and yet it stands to reason they would be a very good trio to kind of build around. They haven't done it yet. Anyway, Bang Bang Gang wins on the 0 hour, which takes us to this massively loaded card. And I found a little bit of a clearer image here. So here we go. Let's start with another 6-man match, which in its own way is kind of convoluted. You have Adam Copeland, the former Edge, with Eddie Kingston, with Mark Briscoe. And as you'll notice, they will all be coming to the ring with a title belt, because they, of course, have championships. And if you look at that next match, the FTW Championship, and then the International Championship, and then the TBS Championship, then the Continental Championship, then the Women's World Championship, then the Tag Team Championship, and then the World Championship at the top of the card, and Ospreay and Danielson is somehow the only match, other than this trios to start, that isn't a title match. And even if you were to include the 0 hour match, the 6-man match, like, they're all title matches. What the fuck are we doing here? Why? Why are there so many belts? There's no reason to have this many. None. Zero. No one can explain it.
Oh, well, WWE has a lot of titles because they have SmackDown, they have Raw, and there's 2 sets of tag team.
Okay, fine. If that's the point, I guess fine. I would just, point out that they've unified titles before. Roman had a unified title before they created the World Heavyweight Championship for Seth Rollins. The Usos had unified the tag team titles. What are we doing here? It's too many belts. It's needlessly dumb. If you think back to when the AEW was at its best, there were 3, 4 championships, and that was it. There was the men's title, there was the women's title. Eventually, they spawned the TBS and the TNT title, and there were the tag team titles. That was it. Did TNT come before the international title? I think it was TNT first. Yeah, Cody Rhodes the open challenge. Then it became international. He just kept building and building and building. Too many belts, too many titles. Needless. If everybody has a title, it doesn't mean anything anymore. Anyway, we'll get there. So this 6-man match, Adam Copeland, Eddie Kingston, Mark Briscoe, they take on the House of Black. For the love of God, I need the House of Black to get back to a prominent position in this company. Okay, there were all these weird rumors for a while that, the reason that you don't see House of Black is because Malachi Black won't eat a pin. Stupid. Dumb. Okay? Malachi's fantastic. Buddy Matthews is fantastic. Brody King is fantastic. I still don't understand why these guys aren't challenging for singles belts. Why? It looks like eventually they're going to build here to Malachi Black versus Adam Copeland for the TNT title, which is great. I think Malachi Black should be a champion. I don't know how you have him in this promotion. You go back to when he first debuted against Cody, and he was as hot as it got, and then things just fell apart for whatever reason. He's a star. Put a belt. You have 15 belts. Put a belt on that man. Buddy Matthews, goddamn stud. The guy does incredible things. He's jacked. He has muscles in places I don't even have places. We can't find a championship or a program for him. Brody King, massive guy. Incredible. We can't find a championship program for him? We're doing this? Okay, fine. House of Black needs to get a win. It would be huge for them going forward. They pick up a win. The other three guys have championships around their waist. It does nothing to hurt them. I don't know who eats the pin, though. That's the problem. You know, if House of Black goes over, do you pin Mark Briscoe, who's the ROH World Champion? Do you pin Adam Copeland? What would be the really nice setup, regardless of how the next program would work out, is if you could get us to a position where Malachi pins Copeland, and it kind of sets that doubt of Malachi is the one who took out Copeland in this match. He'll do it again in singles action. Cool. Lots of spooky stuff. Good. Let's do it. I love it. If it goes the other way, you have to think that Buddy Matthews is going to be one to eat the pin, and I keep coming back to why. I think he's really freaking good. One of the best matches last year was on an early Collision when Buddy Matthews took on Andrade on a Saturday night when Collision felt hot and new and different and sports-based and very exciting. Buddy Matthews is really good. I would like to see the House of Black win. I think that ultimately the House of Black will win, probably through nefarious means, but that is what I'd like to see happen. House of Black gets the win. Let's go on to the FTW Championship. I have no idea why this is here. No idea. It doesn't belong on the card. There's the story that's being told around it isn't particularly good or interesting. I genuinely have no idea why this is happening. And I have not met a single person yet who can explain to me why this belongs on the main card. I don't see it. I don't get it. I genuinely think it's a waste of time. It's a waste of space. And once again, somebody got caught in the Jericho vortex, which he's fucking trademarked because of course he did. I always was from the time I was a little kid. I loved, gravitated to the character of Chris Jericho. And now I just want him to go away for a while. Like, I can't miss you unless you're gone. Go away for 5 months, 6 months. Okay, the roster is bloated enough. There are plenty of guys that could get a little bit of shine. Come back in 5 or 6 months, or come back around All In. But like, this isn't it. And like, what's the upside here? What's the upside in the match with Hook? Like, what are you actually trying to get out of it if you're AEW? Does Hook need Jericho to get over? You would think not. They've done kind of a weird thing here. Remember, Hook challenged Samoa Joe for the world title. Interesting enough match. They didn't really capitalize on it. They didn't capitalize on some of the offense that Hook got in that match. And now he's with Jericho. This should be a Hook, is outworked a few times, is outthought. The tactics aren't there. Tactical mind, Jericho's savvier in the ring, can make the use of rope breaks, getting out, slowing the match down, kind of getting in Hook's head and force the young guy into some mistakes. There's a good way, psychology-wise, to tell a good story here. But ultimately, I don't know what the thought process is going into this one. And, it feels like the better way for this to go, I guess, if you're committed to Jericho just being here and not going away. The best thing, I guess, is to have Jericho win. But what the hell does that look like? Like, if Jericho wins, play this one out. Jericho wins, he has to rebrand the belt, right? Has to. It can't be the FTW title anymore. I don't know what it becomes. I don't know what the idea is. I genuinely think it's a questionable at best decision to put it on him, but at least there's some intrigue there. There's no intrigue if it's just a simple straight up win for Hook. Then you say, why wasn't this on Dynamite? Why wasn't this on Rampage? Why couldn't it have been on Collision? I guess I'm going to say Jericho wins and rebrands the FTW title and sticks it to Taz, and then Taz is worked into the storyline somehow. Taz is not in any way, shape, or form cleared to be physical, to be in a ring. This has been established many times over that he can't be part of a program. You're not going to build to a payoff between Jericho and Taz, but you have to think that there's going to be the mind game there. So, all right, Jericho gets the win over Hook, rebrands the title. I have no clue why, but I guess that's where we're going to go. Next up is the International Championship, second championship match. Again, I don't actually know if this card order, if the card that I that we have on screen here is going to be the one that's ultimately going to be what happens. But let's just say hypothetically that this is what's going to happen. Then next up, you'd have this international championship match between former friends turned rivals, Roderick Strong and the challenger Kyle O'Reilly. Whatever. I don't care. I like Roddy Strong. I think he's really good in the ring. I think Kyle O'Reilly's got a unique style. There hasn't been enough story here to get me excited. And honestly, every time I hear and I see the Undisputed Kingdom, I just think about all of the missed opportunities. And the missed opportunities primarily are two reasons. One, MJF got hurt. Two, Adam Cole got hurt first. I don't know what's going on. I don't know where Wardlow is. I don't know if Wardlow's contract is coming up, and that's why he's just been MIA. I don't like, is Wardlow going to show up and defend Roderick Strong? Because way back when Adam Cole did one of his story time promos, like in a leather chair, overstuffed chair, about how Wardlow's job is to make sure the other guys get wins and they protect their titles. Like, is this why we haven't seen Wardlow? Is he just going to emerge at the pay-per-view? I don't know. But I'm going to say Roderick Strong retains. I don't think there's enough here. I don't think there has been enough here. I just don't know what the build-up for this was. There were some things on Collision. There was a betrayal on Battle of the Belts, which obviously not a lot of people saw, because not a lot of people watch Battle of the Belts, because your real Battle of the Belts is here on Dynasty. And like a lot of Dynamites have a lot of title matches. Not entirely sure why they thought that was a good place to put a betrayal angle, but they did. Let's go with Roddy Strong to retain. And then we'll go on to the first of two women's title matches on the night. Julia Hart, Willow Nightingale. It sure feels like the way that this is supposed to go is Willow Nightingale is going to win. It's going to set up Mercedes Moné against her at Double or Nothing for this title. But there's a small part of me that thinks, no. There's a small part of me that thinks, all right, if we play this one out, Sky Blue typically interferes on behalf of Julia Hart. Am I supposed to believe that Mercedes is going to interfere on behalf of Willow just to try to force that program and to force Willow to win the title, to defend it against Mercedes because Mercedes wants some kind of vengeance? I'd rather see Mercedes in the world title picture. And to that end, I'm actually going to take Julia Hart to retain. Because if Julia retains, she's got her own program going on against whomever after this. You'll have Mercedes in an actual program against Willow Nightingale that's totally revenge-based. It's only about how Mercedes blames Willow for the broken ankle. I think it was the ankle or foot. In the match for the New Japan Women's title that was created specifically for Mercedes, and then she got hurt. That would be something. That would be interesting. Then you could have three programs. You have the main women's title program, maybe a returning Britt Baker. Get to that a little bit later, or Jamie Hayter. You'd have the TBS title program with Julia Hart and whomever, and then you'd have Mercedes and Willow. The one thing that I'm interested in is, where does Chris Statlander figure in all this? Because they've kind of, sort of, maybe hinted at the fact that the people or the person who's responsible for the attack on Mercedes backstage that we didn't see, that we simply heard, might have been Chris Statlander. Could Chris Statlander be in line with Mercedes? Could she turn heel along with Mercedes? Go after Willow? I don't know. We'll find out tonight. But I actually like Julia Hart to retain. I think Julia Hart's a star. There have been reports that she is still injured. Hopefully she's not. Hopefully she keeps that title reign going. The Continental Championship. Remember how they did the Continental Crown and there were three belts in one? There was a New Japan title, there was the Ring of Honor world title, and then there was the Continental Crown, the Continental Championship, and we all thought, oh, they're merging the three into one, and then that's going to just be a single title, a single belt. Nay, it's three titles again, and so you went into that tournament with two belts, one from New Japan, one from Ring of Honor, and now you came out with three, because everyone knows that when you have too many titles as is, what better thing to do than take two titles and turn them into three? All right, so we have this one. Now, I do think that AEW has done a really smart job here of getting Okada to feel like a big deal right away. I think Okada's adapted very well to the American style and the American presentation. he has to keep this title. Now, this should be, and arguably could be, the match of the night. It wouldn't shock me to see this match go 30 minutes, even though realistically, it's like a secondary title. Could we see Okada and Pac get a lot of time? I think so. I think that you're more than likely going to have a few moments in this match that are going to be legitimate, like go back to its social media clips where you see short form clips of things, spots from this match. I think Okada's going to retain. I do think that it's going to be close. I think they're going to make him look a little bit human because Pac is just this insane cardio dude, and Pac does a lot of things that are unorthodox, that are interesting, that catch your eye, that make you go, holy shit, I forgot how good this guy is. You know, the one thing that he always has going against him is that he's been susceptible to injury, which stinks, and it does kind of throw things sideways quite a bit. But I would like to see Pac have a really good showing here. Okada retains. There are a few different ways he could retain. I think that the best thing for Okada is for him to retain straight up. Is it possible the Bucks could get involved? Is it possible that a Jack Perry could come back, realign or align with the Elite? Maybe that's how this goes. Possible. But ultimately, I would like to see Okada win clean, win by himself, and then we move on. Timeless Tony Storm defends against Thunder Rosa. Thunder Rosa, who was kind of going off of the old CM Punk route of no one pinned me or submitted me for this championship, much like Punk said when he had the quote-unquote real world championship. Which way does this go? I love what Tony Storm's done. I love the idea of Timeless Tony Storm. I think she's been fantastic. I think that her character work is great. I think she's hilarious. I think that she's been a breath of fresh air in a women's division that has desperately needed someone to take the ball and run with it. I think Timeless Tony Storm has been fantastic. I don't think this is the time she loses. I think Thunder Rosa is really good. I think that Thunder Rosa has done an incredible job of getting herself back into the ring. I think there have been a lot of awful politics in the back that have been acknowledged when they were doing the All Access show, and even since then. There's part of me that thinks there's more to tell here with Tony Storm. I still think that we are building toward Timeless Tony Storm versus Mariah May. I still think that's out there. Now, if Willow Nightingale wins and you have her against Mercedes and that's that story, then you theoretically could then break out Tony Storm versus Mariah May as its own story and arc. Maybe Mariah May tries to help Timeless Tony Storm. It doesn't work, and it ends up leading to Thunder Rosa winning. And then you have Tony versus Mariah off on the side, and Thunder Rosa against maybe a returning Britt Baker. Wouldn't that be something? Britt Baker was putting out pictures of herself on Twitter overnight. I'm almost talking myself out of it. I'm almost talking myself out of Timeless Tony Storm winning and going with Thunder Rosa. I feel like so much of this always is ultimately going to set up to like a Jamie Hayter return around All In. So now I'm talking myself in and out of things. I want to know, by the way, if you're watching on YouTube or on Facebook or on Twitter, feel free to drop your predictions in the comments below. I feel like I've talked myself out of a guaranteed Tony Storm win, and now I'm starting to think there's a lot more intrigue if Thunder Rosa wins. I think I'm going to stick with Timeless Tony Storm winning, but maybe we're returning Britt Baker, and then maybe at Double or Nothing, we're going to get a three-way match between Tony Storm, Thunder Rosa, Britt Baker. I'll stick with Tony Storm. She'll retain. That's too many retentions, though, really. Because then I've said what? Roddy is going to retain, Julia Hart retains, Okada retains, and Tony Storm retains. Well, that would mean that there has to be a big change at the top. We'll get there in a second. The tag team titles, Young Bucks, FTR, Part 4. I hate saying this. I know that there are some people who really love the first three matches. I'm not that guy. I don't know what it is about watching these two teams together. I don't feel like the chemistry they have in the ring is something that I go back for again and again and again. I've said this before on this show, and I'll stick to it. I would rather see FTR take on Jay White and Juice Robinson in that 2 out of 3 falls match on Collision. I'd rather that any day over any of the first 3 matches they've had with the Young Bucks in AEW. And I would honestly rather see the Young Bucks against the Lucha Bros in that cage match for the tag titles that Lucha Bros ended up winning a few years ago. I'd rather see that any day over the first 3 matches between these teams. It's not that I think that they're bad in the ring together. It's not like I don't think they work at all. I just don't see it. And I don't think it is a good mesh of styles. I think that ultimately, like, this has to go the Bucks' way. FTR has been dominant head-to-head. The Young Bucks are trying to tell this EVP storyline. They've got Okada. They aired the All-In footage. It seems as though it totally sets up a return of a Jack Perry, who then aligns himself with the Young Bucks, which would then mean you're going into Dynamite on Wednesday with the Bucks, Okada, and Jack Perry as the Elite. Could they add a 5th at some point? Maybe. Who is that? I don't know. But that would be intriguing. My thoughts on Jack Perry are what they are. I don't see it right now. The scapegoat thing is good to an extent. I think that there's a way to break Jack Perry out to go babyface by saying he defended the company against a guy who didn't want to be there in CM Punk. There is a way to tell that story, but I think that they're going to probably play it safe, have him be a heel, and have him lean into it with the Bucks. Okada, oddly enough, doesn't feel very heelish, but they're trying to tell that story, and so they're going to stick with it. I think Jack Perry shows up and does cost FTR. Young Bucks win. So that's a win, not a retention. There is no retention option because Sting's retired. Darby's foot is broken. So, all right. So the Young Bucks pick up a win. And then we get to really one of 2 matches the entire night that isn't for a title. Bryan Danielson taking on Will Ospreay in a match that I wish had been built better. And this is one of those times that, once again, you have to question why we got here the way that we got here. AEW is at its best when there is some semblance of a story. You can go back to Omega and Hangman, to the tag team title run, to the question, week in and week out of who's going to betray who. You almost see one guy hit the other in the back with a chair and then kind of drops it. And you can make the argument that, like, is that really a story? Is it an in-depth story, or is it just trying to progress something to another match? This one is just dream match for the sake of dream match, and I get it. You have to do it at some point. If you're AEW, you've got Bryan Danielson saying this is his last year to be a full-time in-ring competitor. The door apparently has been open to the possibility of down the line. Maybe Danielson goes part-time. You have to go after these matches while you have them, because God knows there have been enough times where this company has kind of tried to bank on long-term booking and it hasn't worked out. So I guess you have to have Ospreay versus Danielson, but I don't think that the build has been particularly good. In the last week, you've now seen Ospreay go face-to-face with Danielson and essentially say, hey, I had nothing to do with any of the attacks on your fellow BCC members. It hasn't told a great story. All that said, which way does the match go? Danielson appears to be like selfless to a fault in a lot of ways. And honestly, I find it really frustrating because I would like to see Danielson have a final run where he can actually win something. I've said before on this show before and on others that there was a time where Bryan Danielson could have been the top heel in the business when he was cutting excellent promos as a heel, 2 Decembers ago. And he talked about main eventing a WrestleMania and got booed mercilessly. I was like, this is it. This is the moment for Bryan Danielson. Put the title on the man. And they didn't. And I feel like they've just kind of missed the opportunity there. Will Danielson put over Ospreay? It's entirely possible. Do I think it would be a better thing to maybe have these guys work a trilogy? I do. I think that there's a way to pay this off. Danielson, Ospreay, this match, again at Double or Nothing, and then maybe it culminates at All In. I know a lot of people think that Ospreay is going to be going for the world title at All In, and it's still possible, but I'd be fine with these guys having 3 matches. You could tell the story of how Danielson keeps Ospreay grounded. He grounds the aerial assassin, turns it into a mat-style wrestling match. And it's a technical wrestling match. And no matter what Ospreay does, he's unable to get things going the way that he wants. And Danielson, veteran savvy, the idea of what I said with the Jericho and Hook match earlier. You get the veteran savvy against the young guy or the younger guy. And in this case, the ultimate athlete in Will Ospreay. I would like to see Danielson win. They've built Ospreay up as being sort of unbeatable, but at the same time, they've allowed Ospreay's opponents to really get a lot in on him. I look back at the Kyle Fletcher match, and you say, like, should that match have gone as long as it did? Did Fletcher get too much offense? I'm going to say Danielson wins, grounds the aerial assassin, and then maybe in the following match or 2 matches, then you see Ospreay go over once, twice, win 2 out of 3. That's what I'd like to see. I could be wrong. I don't think I am, but I could be. But I'd like to see Danielson win. I totally imagine that he has pitched to Tony Khan that he loses this in a way to build up Ospreay into the main event. It's not what I want to see. I'm going to go with Danielson. And then you get to the main event. Before we do, there are 2 matches. I said at the beginning, there's 9 main card matches, and there are 3 pre-show matches. And I said the trios and the 6-man for the unification. And I've been looking to figure out, like, what the hell were the other 2 pre-show matches that apparently were so important? They need to be in front of a live crowd and take some of the emotional equity that the crowd is going to bring to the venue for this pay-per-view. So before we get to the main event, let's very briefly touch on the other 2 matches. Orange Cassidy and Shibata versus Shane Taylor and Lee Moriarty. A match that could be on Collision, a match that could be on Dynamite, a match that could be on Rampage. Orange Cassidy, big star with AEW, a guy that they look at the metrics on social media views and say, this is a guy that the younger viewers really like. He's an athlete. He's very good. You might not like his style, but it's hard to say that he's not good at what he does. Shibata, I don't totally get. I don't go back that far. I don't go back to the history of Shibata before he was in AEW. I don't go back to his ROH matches or anything. Like I'm going strictly off of what I've seen on AEW television. I see a guy that, if they're going to try to have eat a pin, it's probably him, because at the same time, you're trying to build up over here Shane Taylor Productions into a bigger thing. They need to pick up big wins. So Shane Taylor and Lee Moriarty, I would think the goal is, if you're trying to build them up, get them a win on a pay-per-view, even though it's on the 0 hour. So I'll go with Shane Taylor to get the pin on Shibata. The other matches, I mean no disrespect. Trent Beretta and Matt Sydal is on the pre-show of a pay-per-view. Again, what are we doing? If you're AEW, like, what's the way to sell it, right? There was the betrayal angle. Trent Beretta betrays Orange Cassidy, betrays best friends. Chuck Taylor's kind of in the middle. Why in the year 2024, in a roster that has as many talented people on it, why am I watching Trent Beretta versus Matt Sydal on 0 hour? Why? I actually think Trent Beretta is really good. I think that there's probably something to Trent Beretta. But this match isn't it. Matt Sydal. Matt Sydal's like biggest contribution to pro wrestling in my memory is the incredible shooting star press into the RKO as Evan Bourne. That's it. And he might be a lovely person, and he might have done a bunch of great matches somewhere else. But, like, again, just because somebody decides to put it on the 0 hour doesn't mean it's a pay-per-view quality match, doesn't mean it belongs on the pre-show card. I have no fucking idea why it's there. So, okay, Trent Beretta gets the win over Matt Sydal in one of the other pre-show matches that, again, this is where you have to question the logic, and you have to question why somebody thought, Tony Khan, why somebody thought it was smart to have 3 0-hour matches leading up to a 9-match card that will inevitably burn out before the main event, without a doubt. Because again, here, look, let me see if I could try to point to these matches as they. All right, we talked about the trios match, the Copeland, Kingston, and Briscoe versus House of Black. That's going to be a hot match. Hook and Jericho going to kill the crowd. Roddy versus O'Reilly, probably going to go on for too long. Not exactly enticing. Julia Hart versus Willow Nightingale. A lot of people are going to be waiting for the swerve or to figure out who's going to interfere. Is Mercedes going to be involved? Is a Chris Statlander going to be involved? That feels like there's more of a story progression than watching for the in-ring match. Okada Pac probably will steal the show or at least do something. It feels like the Tony Storm and Thunder Rosa is a good match, could be a stiff match, could be one of those matches that you come back and say, like, that was a incredibly well-worked women's championship match, and maybe leads to the return of a Britt Baker, a Jamie Hayter, someone else. That ladder match, I'm just not. Maybe the ladder match is going to be really good. Maybe for the way that I don't think that the chemistry between the Bucks and FTR is so sensational. Like, maybe that will be it. Like, maybe having ladders involved, I don't know. Maybe the psychology, I trust those guys. I trust all four of them to come up with something that psychology-wise makes sense, but I don't totally see it. That will burn the crowd out in some way, though, right? Because ladder matches tend to get people hot, and then it burns crowds out. Ospreay and Danielson needs to be placed properly on this card. It won't be the next to last match. You have to make sure that Ospreay and Danielson match is given enough room that it can breathe and that the crowd can kind of go through the ebbs and flows. And then that leads us to the championship match that I honestly am worried the crowd isn't going to be into because they will have seen 11 other matches. They will have been in the arena for hours and hours and hours, and we're going to be getting close to 11:30 midnight or whatever by the time the main event goes in the ring. Samoa Joe, Swerve Strickland, in what should be a fantastic match. Should be. There's no reason that it shouldn't be a really good match. No reason whatsoever. But there are other matches on the card that are probably going to be better. Pac and Okada will probably be a better in-ring match. Ospreay and Danielson will probably be a better in-ring match. However, the way that you make this championship match mean something is it has to try to tell some sort of story. And it feels like no matter what, everyone's going to be looking to the ramp to see if Hangman's coming out and if Hangman's going to screw Swerve or not. Because the way that you kind of wrote Hangman off TV implies that he's going to get back into it with Swerve, and they're going to continue that program for whatever reason. And look, I think that those guys did some really good work together. I think that there is a way to tell more story with those two head-to-head. But if this ultimately ends in a screw job where Joe beats Swerve because we want to set up Swerve versus Hangman again, fuck that. That's not the way to go. It's not. This has to be Swerve's moment. Has to be. AEW does far too often the build up a face, and again, Swerve probably shouldn't be a face given the whole home invasion angle with Hangman, but the crowd loves him. The crowd loves Nana. My kids love Nana. My kids don't even watch wrestling, but you know what my kids do? My kids know the Swerve dance. They know some of the lyrics to Big Pressure, and they, every day, when my wife takes our two littlest ones off to daycare, my two older ones do the Swerve dance, the Nana dance, as they're saying bye in the morning, okay? So, my kids love Swerve. My kids love Prince Nana. This has to be Swerve's moment. If not, you do run the risk of, doing the thing that you've done far too often. You build a guy up, and then it just fizzles out. And then Swerve, 6 months from now, you go, man, remember when he was hot? Remember when, it's like the Acclaimed. Remember when the Acclaimed were hot? It's like FTR. Remember when FTR, before the first note even hit, everybody was out of their seats going nuts? They have this tendency of heating people up, kind of killing it off. It has to be Swerve's moment. I'm going to take Swerve to dethrone Samoa Joe, who I think has done a very good job as champion. I love Samoa Joe. I think Samoa Joe has done a great job of establishing the credibility of that title. I think that Samoa Joe has done a fantastic job of really feeling like a final boss. Legitimately, he does feel like a guy that is the ultimate, video game villain to overcome right before you win at the end. And I'm going to go with David Berkowitz here, who checks in on YouTube and says, Swerve needs to win. I agree. I think it all comes down to if you're doing what needs to be done, if you're going to do it, what needs to be done, and it's still real to me, damn it, then it has to be Swerve. The only reason that it's not Swerve is this, and David also checks in with this. Transitional champ. That's what worries me. If what happens here is Swerve wins and then he only holds the title for a month or two, I'm trying to think when All In is. I think All In is at the end of August. If Swerve holds it from April until August and then drops it to, say, a Will Ospreay at All In, I don't know if that's the worst thing in the world. I do think that Swerve and Ospreay would be a great program. I think that if you get what I said before, 3 matches between Ospreay and Ospreay and Danielson, and Ospreay wins the second and third. The next great progression for him would be to then go after Swerve for the title. But we'll see. I'm not entirely sure where it's going to go. I also wonder where we're going to see the return of MJF. It feels like, given that it's Forbidden Door is going to be taking place on Long Island, you would think that might be where MJF is going to show up. For a while, people were like, oh, Dynasty. It's a nod to MJF's old faction, I guess in MLW with Hammerstone. I forget the other guy's name, but they had a faction called Dynasty. And it's like, could this be MJF showing up here? Will MJF show up at the show at Forbidden Door on Long Island? Like, where's he going to pop up? Again, I think Swerve needs to win. I think that it ultimately is what's best for business for them. You've got to pay this off. Like, build another guy that you can say was the world champion. And again, if he only holds it for, like, say, 4 months here until All In and drops it in a somewhat predictable way at All In, then fine. But I think that Swerve is the way to go. I hope Swerve wins. If he doesn't, I'm not going to complain. I think Samoa Joe's done a great job. I just don't know who you send after Joe next. I don't know who makes the most sense to send after Joe. Because if you send Ospreay after him, Ospreay has to win the title. It kind of defeats the purpose of, like, trying to build to this big win at All In. So I don't really know. Now, we're fantasy booking this. All right. So Joe wins, retains. Ospreay challenges Joe. Ospreay wins the title from Joe, maybe at Double or Nothing. Ospreay defends the title at All In against Danielson in their third match, or maybe second match or whatever. And that's, Danielson kind of builds as like, this is my last year. I want one more shot at the title, and that's where it's at. We'll see. I don't know. So to recap, 12 matches. Holy shit. Okay. I've got Shane Taylor getting the win in a tag match over Shibata. I've got Trent Beretta beating Matt Sydal. The Bang Bang Gang takes down the Acclaimed for the unified 6-man title. I've got the House of Black defeating Copeland, Briscoe, and Kingston. Danielson takes down Ospreay. Jericho beats Hook and rebrands the FTW title. Roddy Strong and Okada both retain. Julia Hart retains. We find out that Statlander actually betrayed Nightingale. The Bucks beat FTR for the tag titles. Tony Storm retains against Thunder Rosa. And Swerve takes down Samoa Joe. Becomes your AEW World Champion. This is going to be such a long show. Again, it's going to be one of those, like, if you're on the East Coast, this could go past midnight, or it's going to go right up to midnight. I'll be here, like, I'll be watching it. Don't get me wrong. Like, I will 100% be in. And like I said at the very start of the show, it might sound like it's a little bit negative. I'm only negative because it's so many damn matches, and it's too many for a crowd. It's too many for that crowd. I think the last I saw, and I actually want to double check this because I don't want to put out fake news into an already toxic internet wrestling community here, but, like, I'm going to go to WrestleTix because they tend to be the most accurate with the head count, the drop count, the turnstile count, whatever. I want to just see, because I saw a number this morning. I think it was like 6,700 was the setup. Let's see. That's a Forbidden Door pre-sale. All right, here we go. So per WrestleTix, they claim, actually here, let's show this on the screen. There we go. Beautiful. AEW Dynasty tonight in St. Louis, Missouri, starting at 6 o'clock. The current setup is for 6,700, 6,721. They've currently distributed 6,307. I get that the negativity about seeing the crowds and everything kind of feeds into itself, and I understand it, and I ultimately hate it because I think that it does more damage than anything else. Perception in some ways is reality. And I do worry about what happens, like when you see pictures of a half-filled arena or less than half-filled arena. I look at this tonight and I go, damn, it's another pay-per-view and it's a really good card. And if you're a wrestling fan who's even remotely close to St. Louis, Missouri, you should go. I don't know what the ticket prices have been. I know that the last time AEW ran a show near Philly, I thought that the tickets were ridiculously overpriced given where the show was at the Liacouras Center, Temple University, and especially given how attendance has looked of late. I would love to see a scenario where like tickets are more affordable and you fill these places up. Does this do it? Let me see if I can extend this down a little bit to give you a look at what the venue looks like and where the tickets are still available. It looks like they're in the second level. 6,700 people. There is a way to make that look and sound big and make it look and sound like a hot crowd. But this is where I say having 12 matches is unnecessary. I think 9 matches is unnecessary. In all honesty, if we go back to the card really quick, I'm going to throw it back to the one that we were looking at before. I think the trios match with House of Black is fine. I love getting the Mac thumbs up here. I think that having House of Black get a win on pay-per-view is really important, especially if you're going to try to establish those guys and you're going to try to build towards Malachi versus Copeland for the TNT title. But the Hook match doesn't belong with Jericho. I could make the case that the Roderick Strong, Kyle O'Reilly match hasn't really done enough. There hasn't been a good enough build to it that it means anything. So if I were going to remove 2 matches, it'd be those. I think that it's important to have both women's titles on the pay-per-view. I think that Julia Hart, again, is a star. I think that Willow Nightingale has star ability. I think that the fact that they're in this like Mercedes orbit is really important, so that should be on the show. Okada and Pac, absolutely. Tony Storm, Thunder Rosa, 100%. FTR Bucks, without a doubt. Ospreay and Danielson, I don't like the build, but it's going to be a great match. And then Joe and Swerve. They're like I could realistically say this card should have been 7 matches, and you could have called it there. Could have given each match time to breathe. You could have had Hook and Jericho on a Dynamite, maybe on a Collision. You could have had Roddy Strong and O'Reilly on Collision, or you could have had it on Battle of the Belts. And if there's going to be a title change, maybe change who holds the title one time on a Battle of the Belts so people feel like they have to watch them. You could make the case that the House of Black match shouldn't be on the pay-per-view and that it could have been something on Collision, and maybe you would have had Malachi Black versus Adam Copeland on this card. I would have agreed that actually maybe would have been better. But because I'm a fan of all of these guys, all 6 who were in that match, I'm fine with that being on the main card. But let me know what you think. You know, if you're watching now on YouTube, if you're on Facebook, if you're on Twitter and you have thoughts, by all means, you can drop them in the comments. I'm about ready to wrap because we're only a few hours away from the starting. I do think that at some point, probably not right after the pay-per-view, I think maybe Monday, I'm going to be very careful, maybe Monday or Tuesday, I'll do a recap of Dynasty and thoughts on that, thoughts on some WWE stuff that happened. I will say, just as an aside, even though this is a specifically very much AEW-centric show today, I'd be remiss if I didn't point out just how much I'm enjoying Tama Tonga in WWE and how much I'm enjoying the secondary bloodline storyline and the fact that we could be getting essentially NWO Hollywood versus NWO Wolfpack. I love it. I love the idea. I love Solo being this absolute psycho who is just going to be ruthless and is scaring Paul Heyman. And I love Tama Tonga just having crazy eyes, bloodying Kevin Owens, feeling no remorse. We had 2 rental cars smashed up, Nick Aldis, essentially threatening Heyman. Like, I love all of it. Some of the matches that have been on the shows have been but that main storyline, we're still keeping that storyline strong. So I'll get to some WWE stuff this week as well. But again, if you watch YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, drop your predictions for AEW Dynasty. And then by all means, if you see this after the fact and you're like, yo, man, you got 12 out of 12 right. Hey, dummy, you got 4 out of 12 right. The hell's wrong with you? You can leave that in the comments below. Let me know what you think. Let me know your predictions, and then come back later this week for a recap of this show, some of the WWE stuff, how things are maybe going to evolve going into and develop going into Dynamite this week, coming out of Dynasty. Very interested in hearing what all of you have to say out there. So you can find this show, if you're watching on the top of the screen, you can see all the places that you can find this show on social, on Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, and then, of course, you can find the show wherever you get your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Pandora. Google Podcasts is dead. Rest in peace. You can go over to Amazon Music or maybe to a YouTube Music and find the show there. Pick your favorite podcast app It's Just Wrestling is absolutely there. You find this beautiful logo with the pink and the purple and the teal. It's a great logo. Perfection. Chef's kiss, right? Right. Of course. Go find the show, subscribe, leave a 5-star review. That'd be nice. 5-star rating is really helpful. Helps other people find the show. You leave a 5-star review. I'll read it on the show. That'd be swell as well. And if you haven't done so already, a big thing, big push, YouTube. Go over to YouTube, subscribe to the channel there. It would mean a lot. It would mean a lot to me because it's still real to me, damn it. All right. You go over to youtube.com/@itsjustwrestlingpod. You can also just type in the search bar, It's Just Wrestling. Look for the logo. Subscribe to the channel. Ring the bell so you're notified whenever I go live with a show. I'll be back this week. I've got other shows that aren't wrestling shows that I'll be doing later this week. You can check out Joy Media, where some of those other shows are. I'll be doing a Philly sports show, Crossing Broadcast, on Monday. I'll have an episode of Snow the Goalie, a Flyers podcast, later this week as well. And then I'll have some more It's Just Wrestling for all your pro wrestling content. So I'm all over the place. We're doing lots of shows. By all means, you can follow me on Twitter @JoyOnBroad. You can follow this show at all of the places that are on the top of the screen. And if you're listening after the fact in the podcast feed, good news for you. In the description of the episode, you can find all of the appropriate links for all of the social media accounts. Hit the subscribe button on all of those apps. Like this video, share the video, subscribe, ring the bell so you're notified whenever It's Just Wrestling goes live on YouTube. And if there is somebody that you want to see, another pro wrestling podcast, you want to see a crossover, you let me know. You tag me, you tag them. We get together, we figure it out. We do some kind of crossover show at some point down the line. I've had a few people reach out in recent days about potentially co-hosting the show or about guest hosting on the show. I think we're going to explore some of those avenues as well. Just kind of happy to get back in the swing. Starting to get a little bit more consistent. It was 10 days between episodes this time instead of like 3 months. So we're getting there. We're progressing. All right. Everybody have a great time. Everybody have an enjoyable time watching AEW Dynasty tonight. And by all means, you can tweet at me @JoyOnBroad. You can tweet @It'sJustWrestling. No U in the word just. You can tweet at that account and let me know as the pay-per-view is playing out what you think of AEW Dynasty. I will be back later this week with another episode, but in the meantime, thank you so much for choosing to listen to or watch It's Just Wrestling. Enjoy yourself out there. Let's hope that AEW does what they typically do and has a sensational pay-per-view that makes it absolutely worth your money. I'll talk to all of you later this week.